The Edmonton Oilers are set to unveil another permutation of their lineup for the 2024-2025 season, this time due to injury, and we're going to break it all down on today's edition, Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And you can start the season with a big return over on FanDuel, today's presenting sponsor. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, on today's edition, Locked On Oilers, we are going to be breaking down the third variation of the Oilers lineup so far through the early phases of this season. We spent a good chunk of yesterday's show breaking down what the loss of Connor McDavid means from a emotional and philosophical standpoint, from a trajectory of the roster standpoint, what it means for the other guys on the team. Today, we're going to handle the hockey side of things. We're going to talk a little tactically and strategically what no McDavid means for how the Oilers want to play. Our second segment, we are going to tackle what the forward group looks like according to various reports from practice the other day. Third segment, we'll talk about the defense, what it's shaping up to look like, and a whole lot more. So, as we sit here on Halloween, it is hard not to feel like the Oilers are up against it. And you might say, well, Nick, the Oilers still have 72 regular season games remaining. How could they be up against it? Well, they're a team that is supposed to be an elite offensive team. This is a team that features a 50-goal scorer, multiple former 50-goal scorers, the best player in the world, a Hart Trophy winner, a forward who's had 100 points in a season, a forward who's won the Calder and been 30 goals a couple times, and a forward who's been 50 to 60 points. And that doesn't even get to the Connor Browns, the Adam Henriques, the Matthias Janmarks of the world. It features one of the 10 best defensemen in the world. It features arguably the best defensive defenseman in the entire world. There is ample talent on this roster, and they're averaging 2.2 goals per game. They've played 10 games. They have scored 22 goals in those 10 games. And that is simply not going to cut it in today's NHL as far as offensive production. So at the outset, you take away the best player in the world from a team that is already struggling offensively. And I don't want to use hyperbole here, but I don't want to say it's a real challenge because that feels like underselling it. But at some point, this adversity is going to come to a head. And I am a firm believer that adversity in sports is a good thing. If you are a professional sports team whose ultimate goal is to win the championship in your league, you need adversity in the course of your regular season. You need adversity in the course of your postseason because that adversity doesn't build character. It reveals it. To quote Dodgeball, a true underdog story, Dodgeball doesn't build character. It reveals it. When you are in it, when you are in the suck, are you going to be able to climb out of it? You know, there's the old adage that courage isn't the absence of fear. It is moving forward in spite of it. And that's kind of where the Oilers are at right now. It feels kind of dire, the simple fact that they cannot score, and now they're going to be without McDavid for at least 2 or 3 weeks. So conceptually, no McDavid means a few things. Number one, you lose your fastest skater, you lead your best breakout player, you lose your best zone entry player. So what does that mean? So if the Oilers, who are already struggling in the non-McDavid minutes, are having a hard time getting out of their own zone, going from defense to offense successfully, and getting out on first or second try, no 3-4 failed zone exits in a single possession that keeps the Oilers in their own end for 45 seconds to a minute. If we can mitigate that, how can we mitigate that without speed? Because in an ideal world, in those McDavid minutes, the Oilers are going to regroup up in the defensive zone. Evan Bouchard is going to get the puck to Connor McDavid, and McDavid's going to skate. As I always say, and the everydayers of Locked On Oilers know, you can get the puck where you want it to go two ways. You can skate it there or you can pass it there. When you can pass it to a player who can skate it there because he's the best skater in the world, he's one of the best zone entry players in the entire world, that puts you in a position to really do some special things. But without Connor McDavid and his speed, it puts the Oilers in a position where they are going to have to work harder for offense. And for a team that was already struggling with this component of its game in the non-McDavid minutes, and now there are no McDavid minutes to buoy their offense, without that in tow, the Oilers are going to have to be a little more creative. And Leon Drasaitl is a very good player in this respect. He is a really good transition player. But typically, he is going to be able to get better matchups because the other team is going to put the best defensive pair out there against McDavid. McDavid also has the luxury of playing with Bouchard and Ekholm. So Draisaitl is able to target lower paired defenders while not having the best defensive help. And we're going to talk about it in the second segment of today's show. We're going to talk about how Draisaitl getting to play with Bouchard might open his game up a little bit more and start to unskew those goals against numbers, because Draisaitl has been on the ice for an inordinate numbers of goals against in comparison to what the rest of the lineup has. But a lot of that is due to the simple fact he's played a good chunk of minutes at 5-on-5 with Darnell Nurse so far this season. So on top of not having the guaranteed zone exits and the zone entries, the Oilers also have to grapple with the fact now their best transition player is going to be on one line. They are not going to have their two best transition players spread across two separate lines. They are going to need Jeff Skinner to do a little bit more in transition. They are going to need guys lower in their lineup to do a bit more in transition. And it is a tall order. Transition play is probably the most tricky part of hockey in today's game, because it is so split second. And like I was saying earlier in the week, it is the last real hurdle for a team that is trying to put its game together. You know, you can get by with clunky stop and start, dump and chase, cycle, grind it out. If you are humming, if your team is playing at a really high level, you can go from D to D, out in transition, out and gone. And the Oilers, when they are at their best, that's what their game looks like. When they have three lines that are going up and down with real tempo, using transition, using speed to create 3-on-2s or 2-on-1s, and forcing goalies to move left to right, that's when the Oilers are at their best. They are not a team that wants to get the puck below the goal line, high, low, across, low, high, point shot, redirect, deflection. That is not their game. The Oilers want to get the puck to the flanks. They want to cross it across the goalie's net mouth. They want to make the goalie move left to right, and they want to force the defenders to make decisions. They want to force the goalie to make decisions. When the Oilers are not doing that, when they have to link up, when they have to really work for their offense, and this is not uniquely an Oilers problem. Any high-skill team runs into this issue against well-structured defenses. When you force a team that wants to go up and down, to go left, right, up, down, left, right, like you're doing a Super Nintendo cheat code, that's when you can really force them into mistakes. That's where you get into things like the loss to Columbus the other night, where they couldn't string together 3 straight passes the entire game. And there was open space. You know, the Blue Jackets, they're not the 2002 New Jersey Devils. They don't have Danico. They don't have Stevens. They don't have Niedermeyer. They are not paroling the space and taking it away. There was ample space for the Oilers to get those stretch passes through, but they weren't crisp. The forwards were not in good position to receive those passes. And at a certain point, you have to address that issue. Now, I understand that game had a lot of external factors. You lose McDavid, you deal with the emotional tax of that, and you do have to grapple with that. But now we're a few days removed. Everybody understands their jobs. Everybody understands who they're going to play with. So we are going to take our first break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, we are going to talk what the new look forward group looks like right after this. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today if you were so curious. Tonight on Thursday Night Football, we have got the Houston Texans and CJ Stroud, who've been struggling as of late, heading to MetLife to take on the dead and buried 2-6 New York Jets. And other exciting NFL action, the Miami Dolphins are heading up to Buffalo to take on Josh Allen and the Bills. The Bills, 5.5-point home field favorites. The best game of the weekend, though, in my opinion. NFC North showdown, the Detroit Lions, 2.5-point road favorites heading to Green Bay to take on the Packers. And then Monday night, Super Bowl rematch from a couple years ago. Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading to Kansas City to take on Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Chiefs are 8.5-point home field favorites. You can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers. The tentative plan is to record the edition of Locked On Oilers for tomorrow, immediately following tonight's game against the Predators. I want to do a good job of being on top of that game. I will have the notebook out. We will be doing this like we're in the press box, keeping observations, trying to do a damn good job. Because right now, the Oilers are not functioning as intended. And when you construct a roster, you have a specific vision for how the pieces fit together. You have a specific vision for what those pieces are supposed to do. And because of that, it creates a feedback system, if you will. And when the roster isn't doing what you intend, it puts emphasis on the inflection points and the pendulum points that kind of oscillate back and forth. And you're trying to figure out what's not working. So the macro problem for the Oilers right now, they are not scoring enough. They are only averaging 2.2 goals per game, one of the lowest rates of any team in the entire league. So why aren't the Oilers scoring enough? So we can start with the obvious. Their shooting percentage is very low. As a team, the Oilers are expected to be an above average shooting team. If anything, their shooting talent is supposed to mitigate some of their issues. When you go and look, the Oilers are shooting 6.4% right now through 10 games. The league average is 11%. The Oilers are almost 50% below league average in shooting percentage. That tells me a few things. Number one, it tells me we are not getting good enough scoring chances, because for as good as the underlying numbers look, the high danger, the expected goals, if we were getting good looks, they'd be going in. Number two, it also tells me there's a little bit of bad luck involved. No team that's this talented is going to shoot this low all season. The Oilers should be well over 10%, especially considering the league average is over 11 this year so far. And again, it's early. As goalies ramp up, get into nice stretch runs, I imagine that number is going to come closer down to 11, probably finish somewhere between 10 and 11%, probably right around 11. But you add that together. We're not shooting well. We're not getting bounces. Then, because we're not shooting well and we're not getting bounces, our defense becomes more important. And because we're struggling to score, our defense is having to be the difference between winning and losing games. And our roster is not constructed to do that. The Oilers are fundamentally designed to outscore their problems. Some teams, it's designed around their defense stifling the other team. Some teams, it's designed around the goaltender being a magic eraser, if you will, to short the defensive or offensive deficiencies. You know, we have seen teams that are high flying, lots of scoring chances, mitigate bad defense with goaltending. You think about the Florida Panthers team that won the President's Trophy 3 years ago now. That team played at one of the highest tempos in the history of the NHL. So many chances up and down. And Bobrovsky, when he was good, was pretty good. And that was able to solve the problem. But in the postseason, when they came up against the Lightning were better. The Lightning had the goalie that could mitigate that. They had the defense that could mitigate that. And when you put this much into your roster, and we did an episode in September where we broke down the salary in, salary out. And the Oilers, they spent about $6 million that they had spent on defense last year on forward talent. You know, they bought Skinner, they bought Arvidsson. And because of that, they had de-emphasized defense, thinking, hey, we got really close last year with a pretty mediocre defense. So what's the difference between margins of mediocre on the back end? If we can just add a little more punch to our scoring, we might be able to get away with not having good defense at all because we already have such a good offense. Now, of course, Zach Hyman's going to score some goals at some point this year. Victor Arvidsson is going to score some points at some point this year. I should say goals, not points, but you get what I'm saying. Hyman and Arvidsson will eventually break through and record some goals. Arvidsson very well could get on the sheet tonight in a revenge game against one of his former teams, the Predators. I would like to think the Oilers are keeping him with Draisaitl for a specific reason, that they see something that they like. So right now, as of yesterday during practice, the projected forward lines are as follows. The Oilers are expected to play Podkolzin, Draisaitl, Arvidsson as their first line. Their second line is expected to be Jeff Skinner, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Zach Hyman. Their third line, staying the same third line it's been all year, Janmark, Henrique, Connor Brown. The fourth line had Drake Caggiula and Derek Ryan rotating on the left wing. It had Noah Phillip in the middle and Corey Perry on the right. I do want to talk about the fourth line for a minute because the underlying numbers are really interesting. So the first few games of the season, when the fourth line was Podkolzin, Derek Ryan, and Corey Perry, they had really good underlying numbers. In those first few games, they played 30 minutes of time on ice at 5-on-5. They had 80% of the scoring chances, 80% of the expected goals, 80% of the high danger chances. Now, in those minutes, they didn't concede a goal. They hadn't generated a goal. Their goals for and goals against at 5-on-5 were 0. But if your fourth line can dominate the zone time like that, if it can consistently have the puck, put pressure on the other team, and take pressure off of your defense, off of your goalie, you sign up for that every single time. That is about as ideal a fourth line as you're going to get, especially considering it hadn't scored. You know, if they got a couple bounces, a couple goals here and there, on top of those underlying numbers, we're talking about a dominant fourth line. But in the time since Podkolzin got bumped up to the second line, Derek Ryan and Corey Perry have played 35 minutes without Podkolzin. They have 52% of the scoring chances. They have been outscored 1-3 in goals, 1-2, in goals for. They have conceded they have generated 37.9 expected goals and 36% of the high danger chances. So what that tells me is because they have the puck a lot in the offensive zone, they're just whipping the puck at the net. They're getting a lot of chances, but they're not good chances. They're from far away. They're low danger. And the other team, when they have the puck, even if they're not generating as many chances, they're closer to the net. They're more dangerous. And I will say, I do think it's important to note, this line, is often out there with the second or third defensive pair. So you need to keep that in mind when we're talking about the context of these underlying numbers, is that the forwards who play with Ekholm and Bouchard, they get a real boost in their underlying numbers because Ekholm and Bouchard can tilt the ice in their favor and provide ancillary auxiliary offense. They can help create more chances. And when you don't have that luxury, when you are out there with defensive pairs that are holding on for dear life, it makes your job a lot more difficult as a forward. And I cannot stress this enough. In McDavid's absence, the Oilers are going to need a more cohesive team effort to defense. They are going to need more 5 in the frame defending. They are going to need to be more on the puck, pressuring guys, forcing the puck to move faster than it wants to. Because if they continue with this, for lack of a better word, lackadaisical or passive defense, they're only putting more pressure on the team's weak link. And as much as I would like to just complain about the defense is a team effort. If you have all 5 guys committed to playing better defense, and that includes Draisaitl, who's been outscored 0-3 at 5-on-5, you're going to need, with Darnell Nurse, you're going to need him to contribute. You are going to need Draisaitl to be in and committed to playing defense. Now, playing with Ekholm and Bouchard, Draisaitl should get a kick in the butt. He should get a little more possession. They should be able to generate a little bit more offense. And he should be able to start unskewing his goals against and getting more goals in the goals for category. But they got to go out there and put the puck in the net. So with the defense in the conversation, we are going to take our second and final break of today's show. And when we come back, we're going to talk about just what the defense is looking like and what the Oilers can realistically do to get more out of their defense, even without Connor McDavid. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. PrizePicks now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this season. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. If you pulled up the PrizePicks homepage, you could look as to whether or not CJ Stroud is going to throw for more than 224.5 yards. If you are in on the Aaron Rodgers bounce back game, Garrett Wilson more than 62.5 receiving yards. Or if you want to look over at the association, John Morant more than 7.5 assists, or Klay Thompson more than 14.5 points. So if you want to get in on the action, download the PrizePicks app and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Remember, download the app, use code LOCKEDONNHL, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 bet. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers as we navigate the uncertainty of a Connor McDavid-less Edmonton Oilers. And look, injuries are part of hockey. You are never going to be able to account for them. As every prognosticator likes to say before the season, well, I can't predict who's going to be in the Stanley Cup because I don't know about injuries. If we knew about injuries, we could do more. But I do think it's important to understand that when we're talking about someone like McDavid, there is no replacing Connor McDavid. You know, this isn't trying to replace Johnny Damon on the 2002 Oakland A's. We're talking about the best hockey player on the planet Earth. The Oilers are going to need to fundamentally change almost every aspect of their operation to mitigate that. They are prepared to run 2 defensemen on their first power play. They are prepared to run Draisaitl on their first line. They have called up Drake Caggiula and Noah Phillip. I imagine Noah Phillip's going to stay in the middle, and then Caggiula or Derek Ryan is ultimately going to start on the left on that fourth line. And the Oilers are going to have to figure some things out. Look, you can't help who you're playing. Nashville has not gotten off to a good start. UC Saros usually takes a little while to get going. Same thing as last year. He didn't really get his season going playing well until January, so the Oilers have that going for them. The fact that Nashville has tried to integrate both Jonathan Marchessault and Steven Stamkos into their top 6 has not gone as smoothly as they had forecasted. That is something they have going for the Oilers. But the Oilers at large have to address their issues. Some of their operational issues are just luck-based, like we talked about with the forwards. They're going to start getting goals from Hyman, from Arvidsson. They'll get the secondary scoring from Henrique, from Connor Brown. Eventually, at some point, Janmark will go on one of his mini heaters as well. But by and large, the Oilers' big issues are defense. The Oilers, as a team, are supposed to outscore their defensive issues. That is the entire point of being an offensive-oriented team. You outscore your issues. You put pressure on the other team to have to chase the game. The Oilers are a great poacher team in that respect, that once they get out to a lead, teams have to start taking chances to score against them. And that's where Edmonton's defense can do some nice things. When the forwards are able to spring the zone early, receive that long stretch pass, or if McDavid or Draisaitl are out there, recover the puck in their own zone, build up a head of steam, and force the other team to play defense. Force the other team's forwards to back check hard. So that way, even when you lose the puck in the offensive zone, their forwards just had to dart back 100 feet and are out of breath, and they have to go out for line changes. So there's more they can do. As of yesterday, the expectation is that we're going to see something pretty close to what we've been seeing. We're going to see Ekholm with Bouchard. We're going to see Darnell Nurse with Travis Dermott. And then we're going to see Kulak with Ty Emberson or Troy Stecher. And I understand the Oilers' reticence to let Emberson make mistakes because right now it feels like their season is maybe getting away from them a little bit, so they don't feel like they can afford to give Emberson some runway to figure it out. I still think you're probably better off letting Emberson take his lumps and figure it out one way or another if you can count on him, or if you need to replace him come the deadline, because I don't feel like it's fair, and I don't feel like he's getting adequate work. You know, you need to play. As a young guy in the NHL, the single biggest thing you can have going for you is ice time. You need to play to get better. You need experience. You need reps. You need to be out there on the ice in actual games. No matter how hard you try, you're never going to get practice as intense as you are a game. You are never going to be able to be as mentally sharp as a player watching the game in the press box, going to practice the next day, and then coming in as you would have been if you had played the day before. As a young defenseman, you need ice. I understand they don't want to play him right now because they feel like they need every last advantage they can get, and they would rather have the experience of Stecher and Dermott in the lineup as opposed to Emberson figuring it out. I really do get it. I imagine we are going to see a lot of Draisaitl with Ekholm and Bouchard. I imagine we are going to see Skinner and Nuge out there with Darnell Nurse. That has potential for chaos, but at the same time, in theory, if you have Skinner out there with Nurse, you have your puck carrier for zone entries. If you can just get the puck to Jeff Skinner, he is still fast if you give him the puck to skate in a straight line. All that figure skating as a kid paid off. Jeff Skinner is still a very above average skater, and he's got a really good release. You've got Nuge out there to facilitate some playmaking, and you've got Zach Hyman out there to be the net front to retrieve loose pucks. That on paper should work. All right, I wouldn't say in an ideal world. If everything push came to shove, this line should be passable. I'm not saying it's going to dominate. I'm not saying they're going to score a ton of goals, but they should be able to win a decent chunk of the possession battle, especially against the Nashville team that is not playing particularly well. Get the puck in deep, force Nashville to play defense, force Nashville to make mistakes. Now, Andrew Brunette and the Predators like playing with tempo. They like a lot of offensive chances. You saw what he did as the Devils assistant coach 2 years ago when they had the really nice regular season, went to the second round, and you saw what he did on an interim basis in Florida several years ago when he replaced Joel Clinville, and they ultimately went on to win the President's Trophy. Florida, really great team with Brunette. The Devils, really nice job. Nashville last year did a really nice job with Brunette in his first year as the head coach, and I would like to see Nashville use that speed because ultimately that's going to help what the Oilers want to do. I don't think the Oilers are going to be able to win a lot of high-scoring games right now just because their confidence is kind of frayed, and they really need to get back to their fundamentals and just play some good hockey because it's been a while. I will talk to you guys after the game tonight. So if you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let me know what you think about the lineups down below, projected lineup down below in the comments. I will talk to you guys after the Predators game. And real quick, thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey, become a fantasy hockey expert, and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I will talk to you guys tonight after the Predators game.